Thanks, Kelly. And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this webinar about COVID relief public benefits programs focused on emergency assistance program, LIHEAP recovery crisis, and pandemic EBT. So that's our agenda for today. As Kelly said, I think it's probably best if you can ask your questions when you have them. You don't have to wait to the end since these sort of elements we're going to be talking about are so different. So please feel free to interrupt me with questions, especially for those of you who've already been dealing with these programs. We want to hear, I definitely want to hear what's going on and what questions are arising. What I'm not planning to cover in this session is sort of other COVID policies that the Department of Human Services has implemented related to flexibilities and verifications and things like that. But if we have time at the end and you have any questions about those, I'm happy to get into that as much as possible. So we'll start with the Emergency Assistance Program. So this is a special cash assistance program that provides a one-time cash grant to families who've lost income since March 11th. This program got up and running in May, and it is funded with TANF dollars. And it is a limited program. Initially, so it's limited in both funding and time, meaning that they said, okay, we're going to run this. I think it started May 11th, around there. I forget the exact date now, through June 12th, or until the money runs out. So we were really urging people to apply right away. It is still limited, but we have heard that the program is going to be extended for another month. That is very new information, and my understanding is that the Secretary Miller is going to be formally releasing that information later this week. So stay tuned. As soon as we hear the formal announcement, we'll share it on the listserv. But my understanding is that this program is going to be extended for another month. I don't know the exact end date yet, but sort of stay tuned for that information. The good news is it's not ending on Friday, which is what I originally thought when we were sort of planning this webinar. So there's some more time to get people into this program who need to get in. So the eligibility criteria for this program, as I mentioned before, this is a TANF program, so the household must have a child or a pregnant woman to qualify. Someone in the household must have been working as of March 11th, 2020. So this program, DHS really designed to sort of meet the need of people who've lost income due to COVID. And so they're requiring that basically you were employed right up until the crisis really hit in Pennsylvania. And that date that they're saying is March 11th. The other sort of different requirement we're seeing here is that you have to have lost more than 50% of earnings due to the COVID-19 crisis. Savings of less than $1,000, so the same resource limit applies. But the good news with this program is that the household income must be below 150% of the federal poverty level. So the income limits for this program, although it's sort of built on TANF, are higher, much higher than we typically see for a TANF program. So folks can still have income in their household, even though they lost income, but it has to be below 150% of the federal poverty level. I have a chart on this slide that shows you what the income limit is and what the one-time grant amount is. So this program is a one-time grant amount. It is not, it's not like regular TANF where you get a grant every month. You just get one grant, and that grant amount is 2 months of a TANF grant for your household size. So I've listed some of those in the chart on this page, right? So a household of 2 that usually gets $316 a month in TANF is going to get a one-time grant of $632. A household of 3 is going to get a one-time grant of $806. DHS has sort of, I think, envisioned this program, from what we've heard, as sort of a stopgap. A lot of these families who are going to be eligible for this program are also going to be eligible for unemployment. So this is a good program for people who are waiting to get their unemployment. Maybe they haven't applied yet, or they've applied and they just haven't gotten anything. This, a lot of those folks are going to be in the category of meeting this criteria. So this is an option for families that you're talking with who are waiting for unemployment. One thing to note, which I didn't put on here, is that families that are already receiving TANF or diversion aren't eligible for this program. So this is sort of a new program for folks. You can't be receiving TANF and apply and get this too. I want to spend some time to talk about application and how folks apply, because across the state, you know, many county assistance offices are still closed. I actually am not sure if any of the Green counties, because I'm based in Philadelphia, have reopened. But for many, many people across the state, the best way to apply is going to be online on Compass. Paper applications are available. They can be downloaded online on the link that I provided on this page. Or if a paper application is the only way that someone can apply, they can also call the customer service center and request a paper application. And it can be mailed to them. I didn't include that information here because when I first made this PowerPoint, I thought, well, there's only 4 days before the end of the program. People should just do it online. But I can include that in the supplemental materials that we send. So paper applications are available, but getting them to folks right now is difficult. People can call the customer service center and request it, or they can be downloaded online. You know, if you're able to get a paper application to a client, that might be a way to do it. But in general, Compass is the way that many people are applying for this program. And I want to talk about that because there's been some challenges in accessing the emergency assistance program application on Compass. If you go to Compass on a computer, you'll see on the website, you know, there's like a banner at the top, and one of the things that goes across the banner says emergency assistance application, and you can just click that and that'll take you right to the application. I'm going to talk about how you access it on a mobile phone, because many of our clients access the internet on a smartphone device, and that's the way they're going to be doing it. And it's a little bit harder. And we've heard from clients and from other organizations that people have had challenges finding the program. So I want to go through that, how to do it on the mobile phone. So I took a bunch of screenshots. So the first screenshot on the left is what you see on your mobile phone if you go to the Compass website. And what this is this is like the mobile website. And previously, when this program, for some of you who've been working with this program since it started, previously when you went to this initial page, that there was no banner that said emergency assistance. It said something about food stamps, and people didn't know how to access the program. They, you know, we've since raised that issue with DHS, and they've changed that banner so that at least when an applicant goes, they see on that initial landing page something about emergency assistance. It doesn't make it easier to access the application, but at least there's a sign and a signal to people, emergency assistance. So I've circled that there. And then if you click that read more, this little box comes up that tells people that you have to scroll down all the way to the bottom of the page, click view full site, and then go to the emergency assistance for families. So there's a bunch of steps people have to take on their mobile phones, which is kind of why I'm going through this, because this has been a barrier to people. So you then close that, you scroll down to the bottom of this page, and you see this button that says view full site, and that will take you to the, not the mobile site, but the full site, which is harder to use, right? Because it's built for computers and everything's smaller. And I'll just say there is a Compass mobile app, which many of you probably know about, that people can use for uploading documents and making changes, but they can't do an application on that app. That's why we're on the website on your internet browser on your phone. So when you go to the full mobile site, there's that banner, except on the full mobile site, the difference is the banner rotates. On the full, I'm sorry, not the full mobile site, the full site, the banner rotates, as opposed to the mobile site where it's just stationary. And one of the banners that will pop up is emergency assistance for families, and you click on that, and that takes you to the emergency assistance for families application. We have been told that folks can just do a regular TANF cash assistance application and be assessed for this. However, if people can do the actual EAP application, we would urge them to do that for a number of reasons. The EAP application is shorter, and there's many fewer requirements for EAP than there are for the regular TANF application, so it's just a faster process. The other really important piece, which you can't see on this screenshot because it's really small, and it'll be really small on the person's mobile phone too. So it's a difficult process for people to do. But if you zoom in, you can see the questions, and there's several questions there. Those are the sort of EAP screening questions that ask those questions of the eligibility criteria that I already went through. Do you have a child or pregnant person in the household? Were you working as of March 11th? Have you lost 50% of your income due to COVID? Those criteria. And that's really helpful. It should be helpful here, because if you answer yes to all of these and move on to the application, in theory, your answer of yes here can serve as self-attestation for verification purposes, and we'll get into that a little bit further. So that's sort of the way that people get to the application using their mobile phone. Of course, if you are helping somebody apply and you have a computer in front of you, it won't be this difficult. But if you're really just telling individual families how to apply and they're planning on using their mobile phone to do so, you might want to tell them the route to take to get there, because we've heard that as a barrier to folks. So verification is happening really differently for this program than it does for other programs that we're used to working with. As I said, this program has some unique criteria, right? You have to have been working on March 11th, and you have to have lost 50% of your income due to COVID. But those screening questions that I just showed you are the only times in this Compass application that you get asked about those things. Okay, you don't get asked about them again. And at the end of the application, my understanding, having done a few of these, is that you are not prompted to submit any verification showing those pieces. You're not saying, there's nothing asking you for verification that you're working as of March 11th, or that you've had 50% income reduction. I would urge applicants who do have that verification, who do have documentation of that, to submit it anyway. How this is being done is that DHS, in order to expedite these applications and get this program going very quickly, initially they thought it would only be a month-long program, is that they are doing verification entirely using electronic sources. And what their policy says is that DHS will check their electronic sources, And if there's no conflicting information to what you have said, which again is just what you said on those screening questions, that you were working of March 11th, that you've lost 50% of your income due to COVID, DHS will accept your statement as self-attestation. Okay. So that means that even though caseworkers are touching these applications, they're not sending out any notices that saying, you know, provide us verification that you're working on March 11th. They're not calling anyone and saying, provide us verification that you lost 50% of your income due to COVID. They're looking at your application. They're looking at electronic sources. And if they see something in the electronic sources saying you have over 150% of income, or you haven't, they have no proof that, well, actually that's not true. If they're saying something that you're still working, or that you have over 150% of income, they're going to reject you quickly. They're not going to reach out to you. Okay. So the upshot of this, the good side of this, is that they will accept self-attestation and things can get approved very quickly. They're processing these applications in 10 to 15 days, and we have seen that. The negative side is if there's something in that electronic verification which is not accurate, they're going with the electronic verification. So if people do have documentation, I would urge them to upload it anyway, even though it's not being requested of them. Okay, let me know if anybody has questions about that. It's really different from how we typically see these programs being run, and the idea was to do it really quickly, but what we're seeing is a pretty low approval rate. And what we've been told from DHS is that, a lot of people who are over income are applying, a lot of people without kids in the household are applying. And while that's probably true, we're also concerned that some of these electronic sources, may be snagging people. So I just wanted to flag that. So that's verification. And the other thing I also wanted to flag is immigration status. This program, again, it's a TANF program. And as many of you know, people who have lawfully present status and who may be subject to the 5-year bar can still get TANF. And those people we're seeing still getting approved for this program. Where we're seeing problems is when you have somebody without a social security number who's applying for other members of their family, or generally when anyone in the household doesn't have a social security number. So, we know that for regular TANF, you can have somebody without a social security number get TANF for children who are eligible, who have an eligible immigration status. The issue here is that because all of the verification is happening electronically, that these households are being denied, and we have seen this, and so we're concerned about that. We still think these households should apply and should submit appeals if denied. If you have clients in this category, we'd love to hear from you. We're currently working with DHS on this issue. And so, as many clients or stories we can be connected with would be really helpful.
Lydia,
yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and launch the first poll box question for CLE credits. Attorneys that are requesting credit, please respond right now. And we also have a question that just came in. What if they realize they made a mistake? Can they do the application again?
I think if they realize they made a mistake, they should call the customer service center or the county assistance office and let them know rather than submitting another application, because that may cause confusion. Whereas if they made a mistake, they didn't put something down correctly, they didn't include something they wanted to include, they can call and we can send out the information about those phone numbers. The customer service center is probably the best place to call at this point, and say, hey, I just applied for the emergency assistance program. I want to make sure, like, I want to include this information I didn't include, or correct this thing that I mistakenly put down. Caseworkers are looking at these applications. So even though all the verification is happening through electronic sources, there isn't sort of automated eligibility determinations, meaning that somebody is looking at the application. And so I think for that reason, it's probably better for the person to call and say, hey, can somebody change, I'd like to change this on my application. So when the caseworker looks at it, they have that information rather than submitting a duplicate application, because that might cause more confusion. They can submit another application. They absolutely can submit another application, especially if they're denied. But it might be faster to just call and correct the information that was mistakenly provided. And that also is a nice transition to this next slide, but I can wait until I'm not sure we're done the polling.
We are done. Please go ahead.
Great. I actually, there's another question that I'm seeing that is, I think, was just me that I want to, that I just want to address. The question was, is the entire family barred if one household member is undocumented? That is what we believe is happening, which we view as very problematic, and we are working with DHS to address that issue. It's been hard to understand exactly what's happening with this group, but our understanding is that yes, if the entire family is barred, if one household member is undocumented. So we definitely want to hear from folks. It's difficult. We think people should still apply because we actually believe that that this is happening because of how they're verifying information, not because these families shouldn't get it. So for these families, they should definitely be applying and appealing, and we want to be hearing from folks because this is an issue we're actively working on. And then the other question I got was how many families are currently eligible for this now, which I think goes to how many families have already received this. And I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I think it is around 3,000. I can get that information out. The Secretary Miller has been sharing that information, and it's smaller than we'd really like to see. So we really want to encourage people to apply for this program if they're eligible. So appeals, people can appeal denials, rejections from this program. People should do so quickly. If your program is seeing rejections, you should definitely appeal and do so quickly because the program is sort of funding limited, although not that many people have been approved. So it's not like, and it's not like the money's going to run out tomorrow, but because the program isn't limited, appeals should really happen quickly. It's our understanding that the regular sort of appeal rules apply here, although DHS didn't issue any information about this in their documents about this program. And in fact, their documents said people who are denied should reapply. But we've confirmed with them that that they will be accepting appeals, and we certainly have had clients come in who were rejected for verification reasons, and we're filing appeals. And so we would encourage you to do so as well. And you can do that with the local county assistance office. Let's see. So that's it on emergency assistance program. Again, this is a limited program, so if you have folks who sort of meet the criteria for it, they should go ahead and apply and get the extra money in their pockets as soon as possible. Again, the applications are being processed within 10 to 15 days, so it's a good way to get money out to folks fast. So next, I'm going to talk about the LIHEAP Recovery Crisis Program. But if folks have questions about EAP, feel free to keep submitting them, and we can go back to that. So the CARES Act, the federal law that was passed, provides additional LIHEAP funding for states, and Pennsylvania received about just a little under $35 million in new LIHEAP funds for the purpose of COVID relief through this, through CARES Act funding. On May 18th, it opened this new program called LIHEAP Recovery Crisis to provide additional energy assistance to low-income Pennsylvanians and spend this money. And this program provides grants to folks who are behind on their utility bills. The program is an extension of the 2019-2020 LIHEAP season for crisis. It increases the crisis maximum to $800. So last season, the LIHEAP crisis maximum was $600. That's increased to $800. But this program is sort of seen as an extension of that season, meaning that your applicants are only eligible for a total of $800 in crisis funding for the entire season, including what's already been received. So what that means is if somebody received a crisis grant, or more than one crisis grant, during the 2019-2020 LIHEAP season, they're only eligible for the remaining funds up to $800. So if you already received a $300 crisis grant, you're only eligible for funding up to that $800 limit. So the eligibility criteria are similar to the LIHEAP crisis eligibility criteria, with one key difference. You're eligible, so this is through the crisis program. You're eligible if you're responsible for heating costs, either primary or secondary heating costs, and we'll get into that in more detail. And your household income is below 150% of the federal poverty level, and you have a home heating crisis. That is defined as, that's this sort of second set of criteria. Your utility service is shut off. You've received notice that your utility service will be shut off within the next 60 days. You're going to run out of fuel within 15 days, or, and this is the new one, you are behind on your utility bills, which is very broad. And then finally, crisis interface is also running, so you can also qualify if your heater or other energy equipment is broken and needs to be fixed. So this sort of criteria in red here, you're behind on your utility bills, is a part of this program because regulated utilities are still under a shutoff moratorium, so people aren't receiving shutoff notices. And I'll get into more detail on that in just a minute. So again, the income limit is 150% of the federal poverty level. For LIHEAP, they look at your income from the past 30 days or the previous 12 months. They'll sort of automatically go to the past 30 days and ask for proof of income from the past 30 days. But for people who maybe just started working and didn't work for a long period of time, they can submit income information from the past 12 months to show that they're under the yearly income limit. So you can do it both ways, but if you're going to do it from the prior 12 months, you have to sort of affirmatively ask for that consideration. So responsibility for heat. So for crisis, which is different from just a cash grant, which you don't have to have a crisis to get. For crisis, you can qualify if you have responsibility for either the primary or secondary heating source. The secondary heating source is the heating source needed for the primary heating source to function. So if you have gas heating and you need your electric to work for your gas heating to work, that's the secondary heating source. So even if you weren't responsible for the gas, but you had a responsibility for the electric, you would qualify for crisis, and you can put the grant toward either heating source. So this is the key difference between this program and sort of the normal LIHEAP crisis season, is that DHS is going to accept past due bills as a proof of the crisis. What they've said they're doing is that you can say, hey, I'm behind on my bills, I'm behind on my electric bill, I'm behind on my gas bill, whatever it is. And DHS will then contact the utility and ask whether the applicant would be in threat of a shutoff, but for the moratorium. So they'll call, so in Philadelphia, right, they call up PICO and say, hey, Joe Smith has applied. Can you look at their account? If you could, would you send him a shutoff notice? So we think that the utilities are going to say yes to, I would say, everyone who applies, or almost everyone who applies. And so what that means is that right now, most people are going to be qualified for that element, the crisis element, because they're going to be behind on their utility bills. People who've been hit hard by the pandemic probably haven't been paying their utility bills, especially since there's a moratorium and shut-off notices can't happen right now. But we know that in general, there's an energy affordability crisis in Pennsylvania, and utility bills are just generally too high. So oftentimes, low-income folks are behind on their utility bills. And so really many people should be eligible for this program. And we should be really encouraging a lot of people to apply. I have been, basically any client that I speak with, I say, are you behind on your utility bills? You should apply for this program. Here's how to apply for it. And it's a way to get a little bit of money to the bill quickly. As a part of this program, DHS is also sending $100 supplemental grants directly to utilities or vendors for customers who already received crisis grants this season. So if you got a crisis grant this season, DHS is just automatically going to send $100 to whoever you got it for, the utility or the fuel vendor. And that's just going to happen. That $100 supplemental grant does count toward the maximum crisis of $800. So if in November I got a $300 crisis grant toward PICO, DHS is going to send $100 automatically to PICO. Again, this is Philadelphia Electric. And then that means that $100 will be added to the $300 crisis grant I already got. And so I will have used $400 in crisis and will technically be allowed, I'll be eligible for additional $400 in crisis. So I could have gotten crisis already this season, gotten $100 supplemental, and still apply to get additional funding. I wouldn't be eligible up for $800 in funding, but I would be eligible for $400. Okay, so there's a little bit of math that happens there, and it's a little confusing when you think about it, but generally everyone who's behind, again, should apply, because even if you got the full $600 crisis grant and $100 supplemental, you still have $100 that you could potentially tap. Just like the EAP program, best way to apply for most people is going to be online because county assistance offices are still mainly closed. The county assistance offices do have drop boxes at them, so, or at least at many of them. I shouldn't speak out of turn. In Philadelphia, they have drop boxes. I think it may vary across the state where drop boxes are, and you all probably know more about that than me in your counties. But you can use a paper application. Again, they're available online, and they again are also available if you call the county assistance office and request that one be mailed to you. The application for this LIHEAP program is shorter than the typical LIHEAP application. They made like a streamlined application. But again, Compass is going to be a good way for people to apply for this. Unlike EAP, where I sort of showed you how to get to the special EAP application, the LIHEAP application has just been modified as a part of the standard LIHEAP application on Compass. So for people to find that, they would just go through sort of the regular route of apply for benefits and access energy assistance application there. The verification policy for this program, applicants should provide requested verification if they have it. And if they can't get the verification, they should ask DHS. They should tell DHS that they can't get it and ask them to make a call. DHS's policy says that they will do that, and that if DHS cannot, get through to whoever they're trying to contact, that they'll accept self-attestation. So the big takeaway here, and this is the policy that they've also said they're using generally for SNAP and TANF, but the big takeaway here is that if people have verification, they should provide it. If they don't and they can't get it, they should tell DHS that. Let them know. I should have mentioned, and I'm sorry, I can't believe I forgot to put this in here, that, and I have it on the slide, but I didn't say it, that if you've already received LIHEAP this season, you can apply by calling a crisis hotline. So it's the same policy as applies during the LIHEAP season, where if you receive a cash grant and then you have a crisis, you can just call and say, hey, I have a crisis now. I want to apply for crisis. That also applies here. So if you received LIHEAP already, you don't need to do a new application. You can just call and say, I have a crisis. They may ask you for something, although they may not, because they have to call the utility anyway. But that's the fastest way for people to apply if they've already received LIHEAP this season. And I listed the phone numbers on this page. So we covered verification. Again, DHS is using these flexible verification policies. Let me restate. DHS should be using these flexible verification policies, and we should urge clients to sort of raise their hand and say, hey, I can't get this, because I think that will help things go smoother. So that's LIHEAP. And again, just because of the new rules, I really urge people to just be talking to all their clients about this. This program is also sort of funding limited. It'll go till the money runs out, or August 31st. And the money may run out before August 31st. So I think the numbers were about 14,000 people had applied and 8,000 people-ish had been approved. Don't quote me on that. I don't have them in front of me, but that's roughly what it was. And it started May 18th, and that's what it was last week. So I think because of the leniency with accepting past due bills, a lot of people will be getting approved for this program. So people shouldn't wait to apply. So the last thing we're going to talk about is pandemic EBT. The Federal Families First Coronavirus Act provided for temporary benefits called Pandemic Electronic Benefit Transfer, or P-EBT, to families of school-age children who would receive free or reduced price meals if school was in session. So this program is to get funds to families whose kids were receiving free or reduced price meals for the days that they didn't receive them. So for the days that school was closed, eligible children are going to receive $5.70 per day, which totals about $370, which is great. So how is this going to happen? Well, first I'll talk about who's getting the money. So again, as I said, children who were getting free or reduced price lunch are getting it. In Philadelphia, community need has been determined for free and reduced price lunch, which means all children are eligible for free and reduced price lunch. So all children in the school district of Philadelphia will receive P-EBT regardless of income or immigration status. I am not an expert on other school districts where community need has been determined, but there may be other school districts in Pennsylvania. I'm not sure about that. But in schools where there's no community need, it's just families where the child was already receiving free or reduced price lunch. And if family already receives SNAP or TANF, meaning they have an EBT card, this money is going to go directly onto the EBT card. So you may be hearing from families already who received $370 or more, because it's $370 per child onto their card. And families who do not already have a card will receive a white EBT card in the mail with instructions on how to use it. So we got a question about a delay. So, and I will answer that. First, I want to go over this page. When is the money coming? For people who already had cards, that money should have been on by around June 1st. And then for people who are receiving cards in the mail, they'll receive that later in June. We have a question in the chat asking if there's an unexplained delay, who can the client contact? And that they had a client who called the caseworker and they said this has nothing, there's nothing they can do at the CAO. That is correct. This whole process does not concern the CAO at all. This is like money going out to families. That's a good question. I think one of the issues may be the lists that the school district is providing, so people can contact their school districts to make sure their addresses were correct. And then I'm wondering if there is a contact in Harrisburg who is probably a better contact for this. My understanding is that the lists were provided to DHS through the school districts, and that, you know, there may be some inaccuracies there. I will talk with some folks at CLS and see if there's another contact in Harrisburg. But it is true that the CAO really wasn't a part of this program. And I'll get back to you on that. So I think, oh, here we go. Here's the other slide. I just wanted to take a minute to distinguish the P-EBT from SNAP emergency allotments because there's probably some confusion. Emergency, with all the money going on to EBT cards, people may be confused what it is, and I think it's important people know if they got what they're entitled to get, right? So the P-EBT is a one-time payment of $370 for each eligible child. That should have gone onto pre-existing cards in the last few weeks. Pennsylvania is also issuing SNAP emergency allotments to bring SNAP households up to the maximum SNAP amount during the crisis. This has been going on for the last few months and will likely continue. This is a SNAP issuance that happens during the second half of the month. And so far it's happened March through June, and it will likely continue as long as the crisis continues. And it brings households up to the maximum, right? So if a household of 2, the maximum is 355. So if that household is receiving anywhere below that, they can get brought up to the maximum. Households already at the maximum won't be receiving emergency allotments. So just so you know that there's sort of these different additional amounts of SNAP going onto cards that might be confusing to families, but they're different, and the P-EBT is a one-time payment of $370 for each child. If the family has 3 children, it's going to be 370 times 3, which is math I'm not going to do in my head right now. Okay, so that is P-EBT, and I'll get back to you, Susan, with a contact if we have it. I'll check with Louise. He is in my office. We answered a bunch of questions along the way, but are there any other questions people want to ask in our last 5 minutes?
While we're waiting for any more questions to come in and for people to type them up, this is Kelly, and I'm going to go ahead and launch a second question box for CLE credit. Attorneys who are requesting 1 substantive credit for participation in this webinar, please respond to the poll question. And if you have any questions for Lydia, please type them in the chat box so that she can address them. I guess people are sending them directly to you, Lydia, because I've only seen 1 question. So.
Yeah, I got a few that were sent directly.
I am not seeing any questions on my end. How about you?
I don't have any other questions.
Okay. Well, if you don't have anything else, we can go ahead and end the webinar. We got the poll responses up. So unless you have anything else, Lydia, we can go ahead and close the webinar.
I'll just say, you know, we'd really encourage people to get the word out about these programs as much as possible. And as you're hearing about difficulties in accessing these programs or problems, you know, we'd love to hear about them as we're seeing them with our clients. We're trying to advocate for changes, and so with DHS to ensure that these programs are as accessible as possible. so, please contact me, or, you can share it with the listserv. And then also, we're also trying to aid DHS in their efforts to collect some good stories about people who are accessing these programs to sort of capitalize on the opportunity to show how DHS's programs really are critical during crises, but also always. And we think that's a good opportunity, and would love to talk to you about that as well. And that's it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us today, everyone. Watch your mailboxes, your email boxes, for the materials that we will send out within the next day or so. And thank you so much, Lydia. Everyone have a good day.
Thanks so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.